guys, it's Paul here from Roll Adventures. So a couple of years ago I picked up an Austrack Savannah X camper trailer. Fantastic bit of kit. I've taken it everywhere recently. It's great to have the kids. It's got 2 queen beds. It came with a fridge, 12 volt system, hot water system, absolutely everything you need to get away. You might have seen an earlier video I done where I changed the inverter and the 240 volt charger. The ones that it came with were just generic, unbranded ones, wasn't 100% on them. Wanted to swap them out for the longevity of the battery. So I ended up swapping those out with a KickAss 1200 watt inverter as well as their 240 volt charger. The inverter's been great. I don't use too much when I'm camping that's really power hungry. But the 240 volts has been good too. I leave that in the camper all the time. And when it's at home parked in the driveway, it gets continuous charge from that. Don't have to worry about solar or anything. I leave the fridge running, so it's great to keep the batteries topped up and maintained. So recently I've been taking the kids camping a little bit more with the trailer. So I've got a 3 and a 1-year-old. Obviously taking them along, I need a bit more power for their needs. I've also wanted to get more into some prolonged trips. Just wanted to update my 12 volt system, be a bit more reliable, have a bit more power there available, especially for those cloudy days where I'm not going to get as much through solar, or the days where I'm really chewing through the power. So after a fair bit of planning and some saving, I've racked up a bit of a list from KickAss. All the items arrived yesterday. I'm going to do a quick video on what I've bought and why, how it's all going to fit into the camper. I'll rip out the old system and put in the new one and run you through all that. So quick disclaimer, everything that I've learned in the last couple of years is just from me installing my own gear in either the ute or the camper. I'm definitely not professional by any means. So feel free, if you want to drop a comment about what you like or don't like about the way I've done something, I'm more than happy to take that on board. Okay, so you can see I've pretty much gone all out here. All this stuff will go in our camper trailer. It's either to upgrade or replace items in there just to make things a lot better, a lot more comfortable when they're away. So down this end, I'll start with, I've got a light kit from KickAss. So they're going to go inside the camper, hang on the roof poles, connect them up for the interior. But they've also got a magnetic back, so I can strip some on the outside if need be. A 12 volt electric blanket for the cooler months. I've also got a projector cinema. That's great for the kids want to watch a movie, or I can watch the footy while we're away. That also has a tripod to set that up and a 120-inch screen to watch it on. Now to power that, I've grabbed a 26 amp hour handy pack. So this is great for the smaller items. 26 amp hours of lithium is perfect for your smaller devices. They'll run them for a long time. You can recharge this via either solar, 240 volt, or just your SIG port when you're running a vehicle. That can put some power back into that. I've also got the new glass door 12 volt oven. I have the old model, which has been fantastic. However, just having that screen door to be able to see what you're cooking. It's also got a temperature, little digital temperature display on the front there. So if you're cooking something that may need something a specific temperature, that's a handy little trick too. To power it all, this is a 120 amp hour lithium battery. So it's going to replace my 2 120 amp hour AGM batteries, and I'll still have the same amount of power, but just better discharge and charging rates. Now, to charge that battery, especially when I'm at home, this is a 240 volt lithium profile charger. So if you are swapping to lithium and you've got an older style charger, you'll probably need to upgrade one of these. So it's got the lithium profile. You'll need this to suit that battery. I did have a 20 amp MPPT charger in the camper. However, I've now upgraded to a 40 MPPT charger, and that's because I've gone a 300 watt KickAss solar panel. The panels down there, it's a ultra thin fold out panel. It's about the same size as my old eBay version, but it's a actual 300 watt panel. I will do a couple of tests on that using a little high performance watt meter. I'll connect that up and just show the difference between ones that claim to be what they are on sort of your eBay sites and that sort of stuff, and your better quality panels. And also along with that, I upgraded to a KickAss hot water system and just a 6 litre pump to push the water through. The generic pump that came with the camper leaks a fair bit, and I just wanted to swap that out too while I was at it. Alright, so 12 watt blanket, pretty self-explanatory. Really keen to give this one a go in the colder months. The switch, when you turn it on, has a 45-minute timer, so it's not going to drain your batteries overnight. It's going to automatically turn off. What I was surprised with is, even on high, this thing only drains 3.8 amps. So I could even use that little handy pack to power this and not have to worry about my main battery at all. The inverter I'm going to use is just a 1200 watt KickAss one I already installed previously. I've already done a video on that. It's been really good for the last couple of years. Never had an issue with it. The only difference is now I'm going to install the remote screen on one of the outer compartments where I've already put a dual outlet. For lighting, this is the KickAss camping lighting kit. Comes in this handy little bag. So all the lights and accessories come in this little organiser. 4 LED strips. These lights only emit white light, so I would have liked to have an orange light. However, just the mounting options with this, the hooks, the suction cap, just made it a bit more appealing for this way I'm going to actually hook it up in the camper. 2 dimmer switches. Like I said, it comes with the hooks which I can put over the rails inside the camper. Also comes with a couple of Velcro straps, a couple of extension leads, a SIG socket, and some alligator clips to power the lights. For cooking, I'm going to be using the 12 watt oven sometimes. So nachos, pizzas, pies, that sort of thing, super handy. This model comes with a glass front door, so you can actually watch your food cooking and take it out when it's ready. Just negates that opening the door, losing heat, just to check on your food. It also has a digital temperature reader at the front, as well as an internal light for cooking at night. Alright, so this is the 40 amp MPPT charger. The reason I've got this model is the solar panel actually puts out a lot more power. With the 40 amp over the 20 amp I originally had, this thing will keep the battery a bit more topped up than the last model. It handles all varieties of batteries, your gel, AGM, lead acid, and of course, in this case, lithium. Handy little screen on the front will tell you how much solar you're putting in, how many volts and how many amps. The ports down the bottom here are for your solar panel in, your load, so if you want to run anything directly off the controller, and the 2 ports leading back to your battery to charge it. The 240 volt charger I've gone with is a 22 amp charger. I've had to upgrade this because the last model I had didn't actually have a lithium profile on it. However, this one will do lithium, AGL, your lead acid, and your gel batteries. So that just plugs into a 240 volt power point. The outlet is an Anderson, 50 amp Anderson plug. It also comes with a set of alligator clips if you wanted to clip it onto a battery. If you want to charge in your garage or your vehicle while it's just sitting around. This, however handy, I'm actually going to cut this off and put a couple of connectors and then put it straight to the battery via a MIDI fuse. Alright, so for solar I've gone a 300 watt super thin folding panel. This is the bigger of the 2 panels that KickAss actually make. I've gone the 300 watt just given the fact that I'm not going to have to worry about power, whether it's a rainy day, cloudy day, or it's a day I'm going to suck a lot of juice out of that battery. A lot of positive feedback on this panel. Been really keen to get my hands on it for a while. So it comes with a 3-year warranty, an extension lead with Anderson plug, as well as an Anderson to alligator plug. So you know you can clip onto any battery that you need to. The reason why I do like this panel so much also, and it's the same thing that I do with all the other panels that I've purchased, is the fact that it comes preloaded with a PWM controller. However, there's also a bypass for that controller. So what this means is if you've already got a DC-DC charger or an MPPT charger in your system, you're not going to confuse it by adding that PWM controller in the line. You can bypass that, go straight from your panel to your pre-existing controller and charge your batteries that way. However, if you do have another battery which doesn't have a controller, you can always use the panel to charge that up as well. Super, super handy. Next, I've got a Lithium handy power pack. So look at this thing, it actually looks pretty bloody handy. The reason I bought this was to run my cinema package away from the camper without having to worry about running long extension leads. Let's be honest, the kids are going to trip over those anyway. You can charge this either via the 6 socket whilst you're driving along in your car. If you've got access to mains power, you can use a 240 volt charger, or it's also got a built-in solar regulator. So if you do have a smaller panel, you can just plug that in and use the thing all day long. On the front is a small LCD screen that'll show you the status of your battery. 4 USB ports, 2 at 1 amp and 2 at 2 amps for your faster charging devices, as well as a built-in 200 watt inverter. What that means is you can charge up your laptop, your camera batteries, or your drone batteries whilst you're out. It's lithium, as I said, it's 26 amp hours. So realistically, if you want to run a small fridge, you could do that for a couple of hours, especially if you're putting more power in through solar or something like that. But for smaller devices, this thing is super handy. Take it anywhere you want. So for a bit more glamping, gas instant hot water. Really handy for washing up and things like that. It's going to use a lot less gas than boiling a kettle, a lot more water than if you're going to use a jet boil. So this model, you can control the gas as well as the water going in, the flow rates, which will obviously affect your temperature of the water. The water out has a digital temperature gauge there, so you can actually see how hot it is. So that's really handy. Comes with a certified gas hose and shower head, and the package I got comes with a 6 litre water pump as well, which will replace the one in the camper. Little handle to hang it off. It's also got mounting points on the back if you wanted to hard mount it. Just when you do get this, don't be surprised if there is a little bit of water in the package. The lines come pre-charged with water just so there's no air in the line when you do go to use it. Alright, so for something a little bit more glamping, I've got the portable cinema package. So I intend to run this through the little Lithium handy pack. The device itself is only about 1 kilo. It comes with a little tripod which you can mount it to. Have its little bag. So quick and easy, movies for the kids, or if you want to go the other way, I mean footy with the boys, great little idea. In the top, you run from 240 volt power if you want to use it at home, in the backyard or whatnot. It also has your 12 volt power to run through, like I said, the portable pack or any other power source you've got. Handy little remote, and of course for the big screen, 120 inch. So to power all that gear, I've got a 120 amp hour Lithium KickAss battery. The 2 that were in the camper were AGMs. They weigh about 34 kilos each. This one here is only 14 kilos. So obviously going to save myself a lot of weight here. The available amp hours is roughly the same. The benefit of lithium is you can actually use a lot more of the stored energy than what you could with an AGM without damaging the cells. This one has a continuous discharge of about 100 amps. Never going to use that much. This one's more than sufficient for what I need. I really like that I don't have to put a smart shunt in. Comes with a little remote screen here that tells you your charge rates, your discharge rates, how long roughly you've got with the power left in the battery, as well as the percentage of it. So really, really helpful. Comes with a 5-minute extension cable, which is good. I'm going to place the battery in a little 12 volt store in the camper, but I want that screen closer to the front so I don't have to get in and out to check on the status of the battery. Also has a really handy Bluetooth app, which I find the range is really good, so I should be able to check on that in the vehicle when I'm driving, make sure the camper's got enough energy to run the fridge and whatever when I'm traveling. So yeah, really handy little battery, save a lot of weight and a lot of space. So this is what my 12 volt system looks like at the moment.
When I bought the camper, it did come with these 220 amp hour AGM batteries. It also had a generic 240 volt charger and a 1500 watt inverter. I've recently changed over to a 1200 watt KickAss inverter and the 12 amp, 8 stage 240 volt charger. So I definitely don't do much camping at caravan parks, but when it is parked at home, the 240 volt charger is great to keep the batteries topped up. I do run the fridge all the time. It doesn't turn off. I normally keep it full with a few beers. And probably the only other main thing I changed is I added a 20 amp MPPT charger. The panel the camper came with is roughly 150 watts. It had a small regulator on the back, which was a PWM. It wasn't really keeping up a lot of the time, especially on the hot days. So I swapped over and bought an eBay special 250 watt. It doesn't reach those numbers, but I found the MPPT chargers pretty good at keeping up with the demands I'm putting on the 12 volt. So in addition to those changes, I've added an Oricom battery monitor, which I can check via Bluetooth, a isolator switch for the inverter, a breaker which runs to a 50 amp Anderson plug at the front if I wanted to plug in any other devices whilst the camper's all locked up. It's pretty handy. A voltage display, a temperature display which tells me the temperature within the 12 volt system, which is handy really hot days. And if it does go over temp, there's a large extractor fan there hooked up to a temperature sensitive relay, which then pulls a lot of that heat out, and I find the batteries do perform a lot better just with that small fan pulling the heat out. So before you go adding or removing anything from your 12 volt system, just try and isolate as much as you possibly can. Unplug everything that can be unplugged, turn all your switches off. There are some things like the inverter which are hardwired directly to the battery. I can't take that off until I actually disconnect from the battery. When you do take your terminals off, make sure you're not going to place them down where they're going to short out on exposed metal. And it'll just save you from damaging anything when you take it out. Obviously one of the big ones is isolating your 240 volt charger. You don't want that to short out, give you a pretty nasty little zap, and you don't want to damage any of your stuff either. So after isolating everything on the system that I possibly can, it's time to cue the time lapse. Okay, so you probably can't notice, but I've actually removed the second battery bracket in this little bay. I was going to put in two, however the battery that I'm using doesn't actually support parallel connection between two lithium batteries. Not a big issue, seeing as I'm still going to have the same amount, or roughly the same amount of available amp hours from the one lithium battery as I would the two AGMs. If you were going to swap it to the lithiums, just check with your manufacturer if they'd support parallel connection. Otherwise, obviously, going to lithium still has its great benefits. I've cleared up a lot of space here, and I'm going to drop a hell of a lot of weight as well. Alright, so I got everything uninstalled from that little bay there. It's time to reinstall all the new gear. These are the four big ticket items here, the biggest stuff. So I'm just going to roughly place them around, make sure there's enough room for each of them, enough airflow so they're not going to get too hot sitting next to each other. I apologise if there's too much background noise. It's a bit windy today, a bit going on. The camper's parked out in the street, so let me know if there's anything you miss along the way and I'll make sure to get back to it. Okay, so I'm really happy with how everything's laid out at the moment. Obviously a lot more room, nothing's too close to one another to exchange heat. The only real issue I have is the MPPT charger. It's not sitting vertical where the heatsink fans will do their best. However, when I do install it, I'm just going to put a little razor on it, and that'll allow a bit more airflow to go through underneath there. I only use it when I'm stopped, when I'm camping, so I don't really see a big issue when the van's stored up. It's not going to be working anyway. There's airflow from a port here down the bottom, as well as an extractor fan, so I don't see it being too big of an issue. So the first thing I'm going to install is a 240 volt charger. It's going to be the quickest and easiest. It'll just bolt straight down. On the back I've just put 2 rubber strips, and that's just to minimise any vibration whilst we're driving along. So we'll go ahead and put that one in first, and I'll leave all the wiring to last. That way I know everything's going to sit nicely. I'll cut the cables to suit. I don't want to have too long a cable and lose voltage drop along that. Also important, you don't want to have too short, you have to add extra. Okay, so the 240 volts in, it's nice and snug. I've just moved back inside to stay out of that wind a bit, it's going to be too noisy to hear. I did have to drill through the outside of the camper to put that in. So just be aware, if you are going to drill through metals that expose it to the exterior, just give it a little touch up with like a bit of rust protector. And then around where the bolt or your nut is, just hit it with some Sikaflex, and that will stop any possible water ingress. I'll move on to the MPPT charger. I sent KickAss a quick email. They're more than happy with it to lay horizontal, which is fantastic. Don't have to modify anything else. I do just want to place a small spacer underneath, and that will allow these heat fins just to sit up a bit more air run through them. I've found if you do contact most manufacturers, they're pretty quick to respond, and that way you just alleviate any warranty issues if you do have issues with the product. I've done it with everything I put on the vehicle, catch can, transmission cooler, all that sort of stuff. As long as you got the nod from them, you shouldn't have any issues with your warranty. Alright, so I jumped ahead a little bit. There was a fair bit of wind noise, so I wasn't really going to worry about talking too much. Just would have been all in background noise. But what I've done is I've managed to mount the 240 volt controller, the MPPT, as well as the inverter. They're all in nice and solid. I managed to lift the MPPT up a little bit, just put on some little spacers here, and that'll just let some more air go through underneath those heat sinks. Electronics obviously don't like when they get too hot, they don't function as well. So try and keep the heat to a minimum. I've mounted the A&L fuse. That one's from Renogy, nice clear open case, so you can see that fuse in there. It's all hooked up, ready to go to the positive. So I've made sure that I've labelled all the cables that I've taken off devices. That'll just make life a lot easier when I do go back to connect them up. I know exactly where they're going to, and there's no guesswork. So that's all the big stuff in now. I'm going to move on to the smaller stuff. I've got a negative bus bar to go in, a fuse block, and a few other little things, and of course onto the wiring, and then we'll test everything out.
Alright, so that's absolutely everything installed now. Like most things, it did take longer than I thought it was going to. But I mean, if you're going to do something like this, you definitely want to take your time and make sure you get it right. There were a few little things that I planned to do, which I had to change slightly along the way, just given the space and dimensions of this little area here. So don't be put off if you have to modify what you're going to do, as long as it's going to suit your setup. So just starting with the MPPT charger, I've gone with a thicker gauge cable just to take advantage of that 40 amp output. So when I'm camping, I don't want to lose any potential energy I'm getting from the solar panels and deplete my battery unnecessarily or lose out on charge unnecessarily. It does have a load output, so I wouldn't really recommend using that load output unless you're going to use it for things that are very low current, like your LED lights and things like that. If you're going to run a fridge or anything heavy duty, run that off your main battery through a fuse block or a mini fuse. It just saves this device doing extra unnecessary work, warming up, and therefore losing its overall performance. So just given the space that I've got, I've mounted the inverter to the side of the wall. 4 bolts through the side, it's nice and sturdy, it's not going to go anywhere. I've kept it just off the floor there, just to allow airflow through so it's not going to create a hot point. I can access the screen on the front here and the on switch, which was down this right hand side. And I've also got the remote screen, which I've got on an external little port on the outside, so if the camper is packed up, I can still access 240 volt power if needed. As you probably noticed, all the cables have been braided. That's simply a personal preference based on aesthetics. You don't need to braid them if you don't want to. However, I just thought it just tied off the build nice and neat. You can leave the cables in this sort of situation as they are. There's no issues with having to put a cover on to protect them or braid them. They're not going to move around. There's nothing that's going to shift and damage them in a situation like this. I found the mini fuse bracket really handy. There are other designs out there if you need 5, 6, 7 mini fuse holders, depending on your needs. This one suited mine. If I do want to go more in the future, there is room to actually turn these 45 degrees. And you can actually fit a 5th one in there. Otherwise, I can probably just run it off the positive bus bar and add its own MIDI fuse somewhere else on the line. I've just stepped on these really inexpensive rubber covers, and they're just going to prevent any unwanted contact with either terminal, shorting out anything or giving yourself a zap. They're only a couple of bucks and they're great insurance to have. So another little cheap and handy device is this little pressure switch. So it'll either turn on or off depending whether the button is pressed down or released. So in this case, when it's down, the LED lights inside that little cavity turn off. When it's lifted up, it allows power to run through the lights. I've also placed one in this second little section here. Alright, so that's the install complete. I hope this video has been helpful in some way. If you do have any further questions, feel free to leave a comment below or contact me on Instagram. More than happy to address those. Again, if there's anything you think I can improve on, let me know. More than happy to take that on board. So I will use these products for a couple of months, not just out of the box. I'll do a follow-up video and review those. But until then, thanks for watching. Alright, that's the install completed. If you do have any further questions, feel free to leave a comment below or contact me on Instagram. More than happy to answer those. Again, if there's anything you think I can improve on, let me know. More than happy to take that on board. I'll use these products for a couple of months, not just out of the box. I'll do a follow-up video. But until then, thanks for watching.